that team has actually done quite a bit of work on, and I'm just coming in to kind of wrap it into today's context of institutional change and women entrepreneurship. So basically, we would I'll go through a very brief intro in terms of the meaning of work-life balance to lay the stage for Tim to go on to the specific context of work-life balance picture in Japan in the pre- and post-bubble period. And then Tim will continue going through the elaboration of how it means differently to men and women in Japan in terms of work-life balance. And then I'll probably hop in from there looking at some of the choices and reality for women, and then why entrepreneurship becomes an avenue to pursue work-life balance for women, and concluding with a bit of an implication piece. So just very simply, I mean, work-life balance, very straightforward. It is just balance between work and personal life, and lots of times in research and literature mostly concentrate on family life. It's a very relatively new concept. It only really became emerged into mainstream in the 80s in the US. And obviously it also kind of linked with the affluence of the society. When you're poor and you just work and feed the family, I mean, you don't really think about work-life balance that much, right? But what I want to really bring out is usually there's a normative stand for work-life balance. Well, people should have a good proportion of both. However, such a notion is really influenced by individuals' value. Right? I mean, some people really enjoy working and they work 24 hours and they still have balance because they're not unhappy. The others might think differently. It also really brings into a societal context. The normative work-life balance notion may be different in different kind of societal contexts, which it's a good time for me to pass on to Tim to elaborate that for us on Japan's case.
Oh. Should we trade?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to talk about some, I moved back to Japan 2 years ago, and last year did a research project and wrote a book chapter on work-life balance in Japan. And it's just a very broad survey. So I'm not really talking directly about female entrepreneurship, about which I don't know much. But it's a very important part of the context in which that takes place. Because obviously if a woman is thinking of becoming a female entrepreneur, you have to think about, family. So the basic options are, well, I'll just forego marriage and I'll forego having children, or you find a way to make them work together. So to start with the conclusion, basically, the first sentence or so of the book chapter I wrote goes like, work-life balance is trying to become a buzzword and a reality in Japan, but so far it's not having much luck. And so what I found was it has become an issue very much on people's minds. And there's a big, basically I did a comparison sort of with around 1990 as a turning point, the time of the burst of the bubble. And if you look at a comparison of the strong growth years, we find the strong growth years, as everybody knows, Japan was the first Asian country to do the economic miracle. And there are several, many factors behind that, but there are a number, looking at it very broadly, the way I see it is it was a system, including in terms of work-life balance, that worked pretty well and was pretty satisfactory, not only for economic growth, but people were not dissatisfied with it. So some of the really key elements of that were, number one, very clear role differentiation between men and women, as we've already heard about a lot already. So women were the homemakers, and men were the workers. Now, of course, this doesn't go for everybody, but particularly for the major companies that were responsible for Japan's economic growth, the Toyotas and the Sonys and the Matsushittas and all those companies. They had the system of, the men just dedicated themselves to the company. And what that looked like is they left home early in the morning, they came back very late at night, they spent very little time with their kids. And the kids and the family finances were all the area of the wife and the children's education. And so that was one thing, and so it gave them the benefits of specialization. Men could just devote themselves to the company, and as Philippe said in the first presentation, a lot of the competitive advantages of companies were based on men doing that. Another thing was this very strong work ethic. Japan, as we've heard, was flattened after the war. And anything you read about the first 10 years after the war, you just read about everybody being cold and everybody being hungry. And so that was a generation that grew up in poverty, and so in that sense, work-life balance was not an issue either, because it was more important to build up the country and more important to somehow gain economic security for the family. And that took precedence over any kind of individual fulfillment, at least outside of work. Let's see. Oh, and then the other thing that was a part of this package was what are called the Japanese style, mainly HR practices or some management practices, including so-called lifetime employment and a seniority system. And what those gave, as part of the sort of specialization where men work for the companies, lifetime employment meant if you joined a major company, you worked there for your entire career, and you were promoted through a seniority system. And what that gave the company was a very well-educated and very dedicated workforce that they could invest in. There was a very interesting quote from Karen's presentation where she was talking about a female entrepreneur saying one of the things she liked about working for herself was it was more meaningful, and that person said, whereas if you're working for someone else, what do you care if they succeed or not? From a Japanese point of view, that is such an alien statement. It's just like, whoa, what? And for a couple of reasons. For lifetime employment, they achieve such an identification between the worker and the company that it's not working for somebody else. You've got the badge, and so you're working for yourself. The company is yourself. But it's not just that. It's also, I believe, a cultural thing. They're very different values, or the way work itself is seen is quite different in Japan than in a lot of other countries. So what the broad picture was that this system worked pretty well, the country grew, and people were not that dissatisfied with things. However, that is not the case today, and it changed roughly through the 80s and around the time the bubble burst. I think everybody knows what the bubble is. In the last half of the 80s, for various reasons, land prices and stock prices went sky high. There's the stock market, that's real estate values. And that's because there was very easy monetary policies to counteract the effects of the Plaza Accord with the yen appreciated. Anyway, but it all burst. And so it's seen very clearly here. Right about 1992 is when it crashed. And so we have very different eras before and after that. And not only economically, but the other things that affect work-life balance and views about it were also a number of trends that were changing around this time. So after the bubble burst, it looked more like that. So let me spend most of the rest of the time talking around this chart, which is a model that came out of the research I did about work-life choices. So very basically where the center is the work-life choices of men and women. And it's basically, how much time and how much energy you devote to work versus how much you devote to things outside of work, family or individual interests. And these are a function of individual inclinations, what you feel like doing, and also available employment opportunities. And these are, in turn, affected by economic conditions and cultural and social factors. And there are outcomes from them as well, both at the individual level, if people are happy with their work and life balance, and that can feed back into individual inclinations. And also there are society level outcomes, things that are considered to be issues or problems in Japan that are partly a result of what would be called not so good work-life balance, and partly the idea that if work-life balance could be improved, it would solve some of these problems. That includes the low birth rate. Anyway, so that's the broader picture. So let me just talk a bit about how things changed before and after. Starting maybe with cultural and social factors. The people that grew up in the 80s and 90s, grew up in a different world. And so we started to see changes in the roles, the gender roles of men and women. Let's see. If you look at, I love Japan. I get into, I watch TV dramas, sports, all of that stuff. So anything, I see so much of these things in different areas. If you look at TV dramas, for instance, the TV dramas, the home dramas in the 60s and 70s, there were basically a home drama. Two kinds of women were portrayed. One was the reliable mother, the Ryosai Kembo, and she was portrayed happily. And the other one was the suffering woman. The suffering woman was a woman who did not take the role of the mother, and she was out in the world trying to work, and it was not a happy experience. And that basically reflected the sort of views of that at the time. But this has changed completely. It started to change in the 70s. In 78, there was a drama by, there's a famous script writer, Yamada Taichi. And there was a television drama in which the main person was a woman who was married to a workaholic salaryman. And so she had an affair, extramarital affair, because she was very dissatisfied with having, with her marriage situation. And then throughout the 80s and 90s, you started to see more and more TV dramas where the main person is, is a woman who's working and having a career. And it's portrayed as a positive goal. It's not portrayed without the various issues they face. But you can see a huge change in that. So we have more women wanting to have careers. And the appeal of the old system of being the stay-at-home wife and not having much of a relationship with her husband is losing its appeal a lot. Let's see. There were, coinciding with this and very closely related to this, there's new views of what a good marriage is. I'll just read something from Edwin Reischauer that describes the shift in the sort of kinds of marriages. He says, I can remember very well that in the 1920s, a wife was likely to follow differentially a pace behind her husband on the street, encumbered with whatever babies or bundles needed to be carried, while he strode ahead in lordly grandeur. Over the years, I have seen the wife catch up with her husband until now they walk side by side and the babies and bundles are often in his arms. If the family has a car, the wife is likely to drive it as much as the husband. And whereas once no husband would stoop to doing any housework, increasing numbers now help out with the evening dishes. And many a wife has made it clear that she will not tolerate bar hopping or other dalliances on the part of her husband. So that's really, both men and women have come to a different view of what an ideal marriage is. It's one that's more of a partnership, not just the separate roles. As you may know, there's a huge increase in divorce right now, particularly. It's called jukunen nikon, which is divorce basically after the husband retires. Because they've lived, in these cases, they've lived separate lives and they don't have any relationship with each other. And suddenly the husband is home all the time and he's in the way and they don't get along. And so, anyway, there's a very high divorce rate. Another change is the change in the work ethic. Whereas, prior to the bubble, people had grown up in an era where people were poor, and nowadays the kids I teach at Doshisha, they've grown up, in a rich Japan, a rich country, and so the views toward work are completely different. They're not as hungry as they used to be. Right, today's the 6th day of the New Year's sumo tournament. And right now, the top rank is Yokozuna. There's 2 Yokozuna. Sumo's the Japanese sport, right? Okay, the 2 Yokozuna are both from Mongolia. The next rank is Ozeki. There are 4 Ozeki. The 2 weakest ones are Japanese. The other 2, one's from Georgia. That's not Georgia. It's not that state. It's the part of the former Soviet Union. And and another Mongolian. In fact, the strongest Ozeki is Mongolian. The next likely Ozeki is somebody from Estonia. So these are countries. Why is that? So the nation is lamenting. When are we going to get another Japanese Yokozuna? Well, the Japanese are too soft now. And so Mongolia, Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, these are countries where people are still hungry and hardworking. And so that's just one reflection of the change in a broader work ethic. If you look at individual inclinations, and the result of these, for men, what their inclinations, they would like to work less. For women, they are more interested in having a career. So these cultural and social changes tend to have had the effect of people would like, what is called a better work-life balance. Women more interested in careers, men interested in working less, being able to spend more time with the family, and so on. Balanced against this is the economic and competitive conditions, which have changed after the bubble. When the bubble burst, suddenly Japanese companies they're forced to cut costs. Lifetime employment and the seniority system had their benefits for companies, but they were very costly. If you have lifetime employment, you can't fire underperforming workers. Not only can you not fire them, you have to keep promoting them and keep paying them more. And so these became, when the economy was good, they could afford this. After 1992, when the economy, the long period after the bubble, they've done away with this. And so the workplace has become much less secure. So lifetime employment has crumbled, and there's much more merit system. And so, in a sense, work-life balance is a luxury you can afford when economic conditions are good and when you have job security. But suddenly, people are getting restructured, which means fired, and so people are very nervous. And so that's, even though you might like to work less, for men, you can't do that. Even though women would like to not just quit after they get married, but like to stay in a company and have a career. Companies cannot give them that opportunity so much because they're having to cut all of their employees, men and women. So, so again, for that reason, we've had, different, attitudes and things that people want to do, but basically not much is happening. How are we doing on time?
Well, we've got about 15 minutes
Oh, okay.
in total, including questions.
Okay, good, yeah. So just, so that's a very brief look at this part of it. If we look at the outcomes, I guess the individual level, this would be really where female entrepreneurship works in. A lot of women would like to have careers, and they find that the available opportunities really aren't to be able to do that. The companies have introduced a lot of work-life balance friendly policies, particularly Japanese major companies. On paper, it's quite impressive. This all happened basically around in the 90s. And it was in response to the need to attract new kinds of employees. The new young people are interested in having a life as well. And so the companies have had to respond in order to attract the employees or attract the best college graduates to their companies with things like flex time and the opportunity for maternity leave and paternity leave and even child care facilities. But actual take-up of these policies is very, very low. And there's a number of reasons for that. Because even though the options are there on paper, in a very insecure employment situation, it's a very high risk to say, okay, I'll take maternity leave, to say nothing of paternity leave. And so it hasn't been working so well. One option, since for women that are interested in having careers, if it's still difficult to do that in a company, one option is to go into entrepreneurship. And Aegean will be talking about some of the women who have done that and how they have not only just become entrepreneurs because that's a good option, but in their companies they've found ways, or they are finding or pioneering, experimenting with new ways to allow themselves and their employees to achieve work-life balance in ways that the big companies have not been able to. At the society level, outcomes, the big one as far as the government is concerned is the birth rate. As everybody knows, Japan has a shrinking population. Smaller market, smaller number of people paying taxes to support me and other people, older people in Japan. And so the linkage is that, well, the fact is women are delaying marriage and having fewer children. And even married couples don't feel the security often to think that they can be able to have children. The nuclear family, as Christine talked about, has become the norm. And so whereas previously you'd have grandmother and generations to help with the child care, now it's very difficult to have a family and children and to work as well. So the idea is if somehow there could be more child care, maternity leave, paternity leave, the idea is that this would help young families have children and therefore at least partially address this population decline problem. 5 minutes, okay.
No, not 5 minutes.
No.
You need to give me 5
Yeah,
minutes.
it's time for Jean to go on.
You're ready to go.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. It's all yours.
You want to, yeah, okay, well, I'll just
Yeah.
keep some of that.
Yeah. And Aegean will take over.
Sorry, we were trying to be meticulously managing time between me and...
Oh, good. Yeah. No, that's fine.
So anyway, Tim has given us a very good sort of context situation in the work-life balance picture and how, well, in the remaining five minutes or so, I'm trying to see if I can link it to the woman entrepreneur picture at the moment. But I'm not going to talk about this standpoint here. But here is basically the choices that women and men are facing, and basically what Tim has elaborated on. Like, men may say, I would like to work less. Women may say, I would like to have a career. Well, since this conference or forum, we are focusing on women. I'm not going to touch on the men's side. We don't have time for that. But basically, what I would like to look at is, okay, women's having this option saying, I want to have a career, but what might be the reality that they are facing? Tim has already alluded a little bit on that. This is just a graphic presentation of what are the women way the participation in the labor market is. And what you see is this is the famous M curve for Japan, meaning women actually drop out of the labor force at a very specific period of time, which is their child raising time, between mid-20s to mid-30s. Over the years, the curve has shifted quite a bit. Well, as you can see, from 70s to 2008, women are like working later to the later 20s, and there are higher level of women staying in the labor force even after during that child raising period. But what it is that the M curve is really persisting. And what I like to highlight, one more thing, is on top of that, this is a general women population, but if you zoom in women having kids, there are only 38% of them stay on the labor force while they are having their first kids. So that's the impact of really what women's role on their kind of career choice here. It's not just because institutionally there's not enough support system for them to continue working, but it also relates to a certain extent with this middle class woman ideal that they need to be taking care of their kids during their formative year, or like really when they were infant up to probably before they go into primary school. Primary school seems to be a good cutting line. Overall, bigger picture is this pretty much because of that, there's a restricted career, well, not only because of that, but there's a restricted career prospect for women in Japan, and in terms of progressing to top managerial or leadership position. What I'm going to say a little bit is that entrepreneurship has become really a positive path for women to achieve better work-life balance, in the sense that they're coming in, choosing the entrepreneurship path because they want to define their own terms in getting meaningful work, without really giving up their role values and role identity. Meaning they don't want to become a salaryman. They don't want to work 16 hours in the company and sell their life to the company. They want to have meaningful work, but they want to have it along with the middle class housewife ideal, that they can still be playing their role in the family. In doing so, in a way, they also are really pushing some social change by creating the environment to support other women in pursuing a career without giving up their family. So that's in the context of how I would link work-life balance and women entrepreneurship in that sense. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but what I like to highlight here is, despite the fact that for men and women in Japan there may be some common entrepreneurial motivations in terms of self-actualization and all that, but the difference that you can see in the square that I put there is really mainly what difference between men and women is as motivation is women are really looking at to work without gender and age restriction, or and also to have the flexibility to work while taking care of the family is one big difference in terms of motivation for women. This is a multiple choice. I mean, like, people can choose multiple answers here. So in a way, this gives you a relative picture of what might be the motivation for women becoming entrepreneurs. And if you look at this picture quickly, what you see really is the largest or highest percentage of women participating, becoming entrepreneurs or being entrepreneurs are really in the child raising period, which is the 35 to 44 period, or slightly before that, 25 to 34. Those are the higher numbers versus men. They're mainly falling on after retirement as I mean the highest number of entrepreneurs bracket. So that really kind of tells us a little bit about the motivation of women becoming entrepreneurs. So just quickly to inject some insights from my interviews with housewife turned entrepreneurs during my short stay in Japan is this group of women are generally highly educated. They have accumulated, I think there's a misspell there, but accumulated quite significant human capital from working in larger corporations before they have children. But they found that they could not return after they chose to drop out of the labor market during their child raising years. To return to work, the companies would not want to take them back. Or actually some of them, they think about what type of life they will lead going back. They decided not to. So they become entrepreneurs themselves. So in a way, I see a pretty strong desire to break away from this very masculine work culture. They want to have their identity as working mothers rather than salary women, I mean turning from salary men. That kind of relate to what Karen talked about, a specific type of women entrepreneurship. So what they do really is in this endeavor as entrepreneurs is to bring life into the work domain. One of the main observation I saw is for one thing, they're really not shy to put the mom identity into their venture. You can see it from their name. They can be Digit Mom, which means a group of moms getting together in high-tech industries providing service, or MotherNet or whatever. So they have quite really like put this identity out there to their venture. But they also some of them actually try to pace the business growth along with their life stage. We're talking to, Philip and I were talking to this lady who's very interesting. She had obviously the potential to grow her business, and she had already the whole plan laid out. But she said, I'm holding back until my kids get to the primary stage age. So they're pacing that consciously, I mean for themselves in terms of pursuing their entrepreneurial career. In others, they would be creating new product, new services, and new ways of organizing to address working mothers' needs. Some example of new products would be like very simple, from breastfeeding clothes, where you can actually provide women with the freedom in public domain to really feed their babies and all that kind of things. But also, like a lot of it go into childcare businesses to support women going back to, continue working or going back to work. But the other thing is the way of organizing, which I wanted to just kind of highlight, is there is an emergence of this women's workers collectives that I got into interviewing. And what they did was they really built up ventures in the local community, trying to actually allow women the opportunity to work in a different way. I mean, not just have to travel 1.5 hours to wherever and work from 7 to 7 or 7 to 8 kind of hours. So they're closer to home. They're creating those business opportunities for women to work together. And within some of the company's practices, they actually try to team up working mothers with single women so that they have kind of a work share system which allow some of the working mothers the support and flexibility. So all these initiatives are actually being brought up by women entrepreneurs in that sense, and in a way they're also very, very conscious in sending out the signal to the society that things need to be changed, what we need to do in terms of getting women more involved in the economic activity with the proper support system, with the proper practice. And I think I'm running way over time, so I'm going to...
conclude, yeah.
Okay, so just wanted to make some simple concluding remarks, some observations. Basically, cultural norms and social structure are important elements in understanding work-life balance issues, as what Tim has elaborated quite a bit. And really the other point that I like to note is the pursuit of work-life balance can be a key driver for female entrepreneurship in both like Canada's case and now we're seeing it in Japan's case. Women entrepreneurs in pursuing that specific path are crafting their own path to pursue a career without giving up their role, values, and role identity. And in doing so, I think maybe not immediately, but we're looking at they becoming a potential force for social change because they are actually utilizing the attention that they get from media, from the government, or from the general public to actually send out messages to the society. With that, I conclude.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Tim.